Good evening, and welcome to The Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is November 18th, 2016. Yes, my last broadcast, I was wrong. I predicted that Hillary Clinton might very well steal the election from Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump would get the popular vote. Well, I was wrong, and yet I wasn't wrong. Yes, Donald Trump is now the President-elect of the United States for the moment. It's very possible that if the machinations of the globalists succeed, that there will be no Trump presidency and that the presidency will be handed to Hillary Clinton. Well, we'll see how that goes. But the reason I say that is because there's so much unrest in the streets right now, and it's ongoing. We'll see, it is well funded, it's well organized, it's in multiple cities, and my understanding is that many of these protesters are actually being paid. And this would be from people who are above the level of elected officials, people with bottomless pockets, people who control the creation of the currency themselves, the multinational banks, the multinational corporations, the families, with the long bloodlines that have legacies that they want to pass on to their children and their grandchildren. They don't want to lose that power that they have. They want to continue to consolidate that power that they may have started way back in the 19th century, like, for instance, the Rockefellers or something. You know, the Rockefellers who promoted eugenics and applauded and helped finance Hitler, and the other families that were involved in that. The Bushes even, who were perhaps not into the 19th century, but at least 60, 70, 80 years ago, they were involved. They helped bring about the catastrophe, many of the catastrophes that happened in the 20th century. And so far, we haven't seen the massive death of the 20th century here in the 21st century, but hey, we're only 16 years into it. We're just getting started. So they are just getting started with the massive bloodletting that they were mostly responsible for in the 20th century, the 19th century, the 18th century, 17th century, and on back through history. So we cannot put anything past these people. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that there might be an organizing force at the very top of street demonstrations in the United States that seek to overthrow the duly elected government. People are already asking, why is there an electoral college? What's that all about? Well, in this case, I mean, some people might complain. They say, well, you know, it's not the will of the people. But in this case, maybe it makes sense. I finally had it explained to me in a way that makes sense. And that is that if you go with the popular vote, then the major cities where most of the people live will be represented, and the people who live in the rural areas will have zero representation. They won't count. The states, the Midwest, many of the western states that are so they have a low population, they would be ignored because they wouldn't swing the story. It would be New York, it would be California, and a few other highly populated states that would run the country if it went strictly by the populist vote. So now I understand how maybe the Electoral College does make sense, because it protects the minority. It helps to protect the minority. And in this case, it clearly has. Well, I think the reality is that, and there is indication that this is the case, the popular vote actually went to Trump. But because of the depredations and the shenanigans and the vote fraud that went on voting day and before, that very well might have been an attempt to actually win the country for Hillary Clinton. And we certainly know that Hillary Clinton is capable of attempting to use fraud to win the election. She certainly did it against Barack Obama in the primaries when she was running against him, and he eventually won, of course. But famously or infamously, in the New Hampshire primary, which is the first primary, against Barack Obama, the exit polls showed that Barack Obama was ahead. But Hillary Clinton won. And how did that happen? Normally, exit polls are the most accurate polls. And the reason being is that people ask voters, how did you vote? And they have no reason to lie. And they're coming out of the polls. So we know they voted. They actually voted. And so those polls are considered to be the most accurate. But in this case, it was completely the opposite. And I remember very well hearing on the radio myself, or maybe it was television, I can't remember, but they were commenting on this discrepancy, this unusual situation in which the exit polls were so wrong. Well, they asked each other, do you think that maybe the pundits and the news networks and so on, the media, will no longer accept exit polls as the most accurate polls? Maybe that's what they should do. Maybe they should think about that. They should stop. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe the exit polls are not accurate. You think they'll put less credence into them? No, they probably won't. They'll probably continue on. In other words, they swept it under the rug and just forgot about it as an anomaly. But Bev Harris of blackboxvoting.org, which is the #1 nonpartisan watchdog whistleblower group, they look for election fraud. You can go to the website, blackboxvoting.org, and the person who runs it is Beverly Harris, a very heroic American woman. She's actually a Democrat, but she found evidence, videotaped, of fraud during that New Hampshire primary back in 2008. And that was very clear. There was a van in which all the votes from the primary put in that van. Once they're in that van, there was no supervision whatsoever. They followed it. The black box voting people followed the van. The van sped up. It was careening around corners, trying to shake the people who were following. And they were videotaping the whole time. So you can see the van trying to get away from the people following them. Then finally it arrives at its destination, and they begin to bring the boxes, the sealed boxes. They were sealed when they went into that van. They were sealed when they came out of the van, but in a much more sloppy way, very hastily, as if they clearly had been opened inside that van. And the people who came out looked with those boxes, with dollies carrying the boxes into the next location where they were going to be stored and counted. They were very suspicious looking. They even were nervous, you could tell. They dropped some of the boxes, and they were videotaping the whole time. So it's all available on videotape. And so I think this is pretty good proof that there was shenanigans going on in 2008 at that primary in New Hampshire, in which, as an aberration, Hillary Clinton won. But the reason why she wanted to win New Hampshire in the first place was because that was right out of the box of the first primary. And we saw again, when she ran for president this year, in the caucuses, in the primaries, all kinds of evidence of fraud, shenanigans going on with the winning the coin toss 6 in a row. That's how some of these decisions were made at these caucuses. And clearly the bias of the Democratic National Committee to put up Hillary Clinton as the presidential candidate no matter what. Despite the enormous popularity of Bernie Sanders, despite the fact that the turnout for support was much bigger in the primaries for Bernie Sanders. He obviously had a lot more popularity. Nevertheless, because the rules were changed, the DNC just simply did whatever it took. They were very bold in making certain that the candidate that they had chosen was the one who became the actual presidential candidate for the run against the Republican. This is the same, this is so different, such a contrast between the way that the other campaign was run in the primaries, where Donald Trump was considered to be absolutely impossible. There's no possible way that Donald Trump could win the candidacy in those primaries. I mean, he was discounted by virtually all of the mainstream media pundits, and the odds against him were astronomically against him in the Las Vegas betting organization that does this every year, where people can bet. Well, they turned out to be wrong. And Trump's strategy clearly worked, because he knocked 16 other candidates out of the race and was the last man standing. And then, of course, winning the actual presidency due to the Electoral College. But all I'm saying is that the likelihood is that he actually won many, many more votes than were recorded. But even though there were shenanigans, it wasn't enough to win Hillary Clinton the election. And so now we have President Trump. And this may or may not be, earth-shaking. Remember, we still live in a republic in which there is a system of checks and balances, I hope, still in place, at least it's supposed to be. Now, it's true that the power of the executive branch is way overbloated. It's top-heavy with the executive power. And this is not a good thing. Our country was set up to prevent change from happening too quickly, because that's where the abuses can lie. Yes, a dictator can get things done really quick. Like Hitler, when he became dictator, boom, he did all these good things, got the Autobahn up and running, created the Volkswagen, and did a lot of other things, got people to work. And part of it was to build the Nazi war machine. Yeah, he got them to work all right. And then ended up destroying most of his own country by his massive power grab, which was funded by the same people who are now, or their descendants, who are now funding the massive power grab that we're seeing right now. And the American presidents, for a very long time, probably since the death of Kennedy, have been completely controlled by these same powers that want to increase or focus or concentrate power at the very pinnacle of wealth in the world, not nationally, but globally. Part of that is something like the drone program. I mean, the drone program is supposed to be killing terrorists. Actually, what it's doing is creating terrorists. And I wanted to show you a clip. It's actually a trailer for a new movie that I thought was interesting. I haven't seen the movie yet. But the trailer itself will fill you in on much of what the purpose for the existence of this movie is. And it's a brand new movie, 2016. It's called National Bird. Now, will you see this at your local Cineplex? Not very likely. It will probably be available on the internet. Like so many of these very powerful, hard-hitting documentaries, it may be simply too hot to handle for the major distributors to put on the major screens and make it available to the ordinary Joe who just wants to see a movie on Saturday night. It's just a pretty amazing trailer. So let's roll that trailer, just a couple minutes long.
You literally just kind of hover, and you would wait until he walked out to the field to meet with some friends for something, and you'd blow him up. Drop a Hellfire missile on him. Maybe we killed our objective, maybe we killed a guy who we thought was our objective. You don't know.
When I first got into the military, I was thinking it was a force for good in the world. I thought I was going to be on the right side of history, and today I don't believe I was.
I still have a top secret clearance, so I have to be extraordinarily cautious about what I can and can't say on camera.
My job was to watch what's happening in the video, the drones, and identify everything.
Adolescent near the rear of the SUV.
That's deceptive. You get the opinion that you're at 10,000 feet, you see this photograph, you know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. You know what you see in 2 dimensions.
You see someone die because you said it was okay to kill them.
It's too easy. They just embolden commanders.
Sensors in, let the party begin.
Because there is no threat.
Oh, sweet target.
I mean, this could grow to get so out of control.
Somebody downstairs was knocking at the door, and immediately both people at the door shoved FBI badges in my face.
The Espionage Act is one of the most serious charges you can level against an American.
That I'm probably going to get indicted and I'm probably going to get charged.
I lost part of my humanity working in the drone program. It's a secret program. I can't just go telling the public what it is. What I can tell you is that to me, it's frightening.
Okay, so there you have it. And I think it's going to be a very interesting and probably frightening and disturbing film. But we need this kind of thing. This has a beneficial influence on the body politic. It really is an important film. I think we should all see it as much as really get in there and just grit your teeth and watch it. There have been many different efforts to bring the horrors of the drone program to the attention of the American people. So far, it has been to no avail. I mean, the drone program continues. Barack Obama actually expanded it. It started under the George Bush administration. Remember, the drones became operational in the late 90s. That was when they first got the technology to build an airplane, or you could even put in a remote control operating system into an existing aircraft. It could, you could take over an aircraft and turn it into a drone if you wanted to, with the proper equipment that's installed in there. The same thing could be happening with so much now. Cars can now be remotely taken over and run. Even when someone's driving it, your driving can be actually taken right out of your hands because everything is electronic now. And so more and more these can be used as weapons. And we have, of course, now the drone program. It's in Pakistan, and why are they bombing in Pakistan? We're not at war with Pakistan, but they are, as well as many other countries. And if things continue, they will just be expanded. And it is pernicious, and it has to be stopped. It's a war crime. You cannot kill civilians. I'm sorry. It's against international law. It's against American law. And so this has made every American president a war criminal. Barack Obama is a war criminal. If Donald Trump does not end the drone program, and if he signs off on these murders, then he also will be a war criminal. This is a crime against humanity by any definition. And I know that people nowadays seem to think that it's no big deal. You kill civilians. I mean, it's just everybody does it. Well, yeah, unfortunately, I suppose you could say that that's the way the world has gone. But there's no reason why people should just be complacent and say there's nothing we can do about it. Because there is. Rulers, ultimately, the bottom line is they rule by the consent of the governed. Without that, they will be powerless. They require people behind them to support them. They don't have that support, they're going to go down. Ultimately, they will go down. And so this is what we have to face in the future. We have to consider this. It's very, very important to look into this. There are so many other important issues that we need to talk about. And I guess I should get back to the issue of the election. That's really on everybody's mind right now. I have another clip to show you, and this is from InfoWars with David Knight interviewing Madsen. What's his first name? Michael Madsen. He is a investigative reporter, highly respected, really knows his stuff. I have about a 10-minute clip, and this is discussing where we are now with these street demonstrations, and also the history of the color revolutions and who funds them. So let's roll that clip, and then I'll talk about that.
Joining me now is Wayne Madsen, InfoWars correspondent and, of course, publisher of the Wayne Madsen Report. I want to talk to Wayne about what we see in terms of the reactions to this election. We have to understand, this is something that is far deeper, far more orchestrated than simply the reactions of a lot of spoiled millennials, social justice warriors out there. This has all the hallmarks of a George Soros color revolution. And to break that down for us is Wayne Madsen. Thank you, Wayne.
Hi, good to be with you. Yeah, if you look at the history of these color or themed revolutions, you see that in many countries, including Ukraine, twice, where Viktor Yanukovych was elected in 2004, and he was elected again later. Immediately, the Soros people, through his Open Society Institute and Foundation, and associated groups like the National Endowment for Democracy, which is nothing more than a cipher for the CIA, began street demonstrations, massive street demonstrations that in both cases in Ukraine resulted in the overthrow of the duly elected government.
Yeah, he admitted to funding, to financing the Maidan Square Revolution 2013-2014. That's
right, and he also funded the 2004 revolution, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004, which saw this guy, Viktor Yushchenko, who did not win that election, actually becoming the president, even though Yanukovych won. The first recorded incident of a themed revolution was in the 90s, again, funded with Soros money, called the Bulldozer Revolution against Slobodan Milosevic in what was then rump Yugoslavia, what was left of that country. And we saw it play out again. I said in Ukraine, we saw the Rose Revolution in Georgia that put this guy Saakashvili in power, another Soros acolyte. We've seen similar revolutions, the Arab Spring, for example, the Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia, the Lotus Revolution in Egypt, the Green Revolution, which was aborted in Iran, Cedar Revolution, another failed revolution in Lebanon, the Olive Tree Revolution, a failed attempt in Palestine, goes on and on. And then there were attempts in Russia, the White Revolution. And right now, China has cracked down on an attempted revolution for Hong Kong to become independent called the Umbrella Revolution. So
they
we
love to
see
seize on a, yeah, they love to, we got this pattern here where they love to seize on a color. It's typically done with students, typically done with funding from the U.S., CIA, whatever, but also with non-governmental organizations that are run by George Soros. They like to pick these colors and everything. And we also see, don't we, Wayne, a pattern where they come out and they question the legitimacy of an election. We got all these people out there saying, oh, it's the Electoral College. Oh, she won the popular vote, but this Electoral College is going to put him in. That's their subtle way of planting that seed. Well, it's not quite legitimate. And then the other side of that is they revolt against somebody that they paint as authoritarian. So you see both of these tactics being put out against Donald Trump at this point in time, don't you?
Yeah, and the day after the election, the morning after, when Hillary and Bill Clinton came out at the New Yorker hotel before her concession speech, you saw Bill Clinton wearing a purple tie. You saw Hillary wearing a sort of purple lapels and a purple blouse. And a bunch of the reporters there said, hey, what's going on? What's this? And the spokespeople for the Clintons put the word out, well, that's a coming together of blue America and red America. You have purple America. I didn't buy it. I said, there's something going on here. These Clintons. And sure enough, we saw these demonstrations break out, and someone alerted me, somebody that reads my website alerted me and said, look, here's the pictures of those arrested in Portland, Oregon, and several of these mugshots, the people were wearing some sort of purple something, a purple shirt, a purple scarf, but it was quite clear that we were we were getting a taste of our own medicine, in this case, a purple revolution.
Yeah, we look at this and the tactics, like I pointed out, Soros's involvement, funding it, the questioning of the legitimacy of the election, the authoritarian claims, and said, I wonder what color this is going to be. Will it be black? Will it be rainbow? He pointed out, hey, it'll probably be purple. And we've seen Obama putting out the narrative continually, even as he's meeting with Merkel. Hey, we've got to understand you can't just do this alone. We need to have concession. We need to have compromise. We all need to come together. That's the way they're going to put this out there. Have we ever heard that from Barack Obama throughout his administration? Absolutely not. He would come out and say, I'm not going to wait for Congress to ratify, or the Senate to ratify this treaty, this Paris Accord, or I don't want to wait for them to do this, or I tried to get them to do that. I'm just going to do it by executive order. I don't really care what Congress says. So they've never been about compromise. They've never been about building a consensus. And yet that's their pushback to say, hey, you don't really have any authority to govern. And if you do push back and you do follow the mandate and the agenda and work on the issues that people elected you to do, we're going to say you're authoritarian.
Yeah, we certainly see Obama doing that overseas right now. In Germany with Angela Merkel hyping up the EU and NATO, and he was in Greece with the prime minister there, again, hyping up all these international organizations. That at the same time, we see Russia withdrawing from the International Criminal Court. Philippines may follow. The Brexit. He was also kind of like when he was with Merkel, saying, "Well, we want to see a smooth Brexit." It's clear that what Obama's doing now in this last trip, he's trying to shore up these globalist contrivances like the EU, NATO, the International Criminal Court, and these failing trade programs. He mentioned the transatlantic trade agreement, which is basically dead on arrival, and the really very ill Trans-Pacific partnership.
Yeah, well, they pronounced that as dead. And I thought it was interesting that they waited until after the election to pronounce that dead. We were told by the mainstream media, hey, there's one thing that the two of them agree on, and that is TPP isn't going to go through. Well, if that was the case, then they could have said before the election that TPP was dead. But they waited until after the election because they knew that if Hillary had been elected, TPP would have gone through. But I want to finish up with one last thing and get your comment on this. In a Free Thought article talking about George Soros's connection, pointing out the fact that his Open Society Foundation was calling on people to organize in these various cities, putting themselves at the center of this, organizing this. They also pointed out that in the WikiLeaks emails of Hillary Clinton that they put in their archives, we can see that George Soros and Hillary Clinton were talking about things that needed to be done in Albania. George Soros said to Hillary Clinton, two things need to be done urgently. We need to bring the full weight of the international community to bear on the prime minister there. We need to appoint a senior European official as mediator. And then he told Hillary Clinton three people that would be acceptable to him. He is the puppet master. He has used Hillary Clinton before, and we should be very aware of this history as they try to gaslight this and say, oh, you're just conspiracy theorists. No, we've seen the historical pattern of the way Soros has operated for a couple of decades, at least more than 2 decades probably, and then Hillary Clinton more recently.
Yeah, I would like to see President Trump look at applying the Logan Act from the late 18th century, which was an act, a law which forbids U.S. citizens from engaging in their own private foreign policies. Now,
yes.
It's questionable whether when Clinton was Secretary of State and Obama, that they weren't like authorizing Soros, but that would be very, very hard to prove under Trump, who's basically saying we need to disengage from a lot of this type of stuff overseas, and there have been some attempts to implement or at least bring into force the Logan Act against individuals, but it would be I think Soros is one of the reasons why those founders passed the Logan Act. They were trying to prevent private citizens from getting,
right.
For example, the U.S. involved in a war.
We're about out of time, but you're absolutely right. And I think we ought to see some of the people who are powerful, like CEOs and Hollywood executives who call for violence, say we need to fund violence, we need to assassinate Trump. They need to be treated like the same way that they're treating people who tweet that stuff out from their mom's basement. Thank you so much for joining us, Wayne Madsen, Wayne Madsen Report, and a frequent InfoWars correspondent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet.
All right, so I thought that was a fairly interesting interview because it really is looking into what has happened in the past and what could happen in the future in the United States. So we'll see how this all shakes out. Will these street demonstrations continue? Will they catch on and become a national movement which will ultimately destroy the presidency of Donald J. Trump before it even starts, and perhaps give the presidency to Hillary Clinton or someone else? Who knows? That's the future. We can only speculate. But it is very helpful to understand the direction that things are going. And as Michael Madsen and David Knight talked about, they did say that some of these color revolutions failed. They don't all succeed. So, and is it even really a color revolution at all? Is this just wishful thinking on the part of the administration and the Clinton family, the Clinton crime family, and the other globalists who want to regain complete control and have their person as the top dog in U.S. government? Who knows? Only time will tell. I did think it was interesting that they were talking about, okay, what does Obama appear to be doing right at the moment? He appears to be smoothing the waters and let's all be unified. And he's over in Europe talking to the European leadership. And clearly, according to Michael Madsen, what's going on is an attempt to solidify the various leaderships of the globalists to give a unified front so everybody's on the same page about the plan of what to do to deal with Trump. Because remember, Trump is not just about Trump. Trump represents a movement, a global movement of people who are tired of the globalists. They want nationalism. They want national sovereignty. They want personal sovereignty. They want control over their own lives. They want these wars to stop. And they want prosperity. They are tired of being sucked dry by the big banks, the multinational corporations, and they're tired of being poisoned. They didn't talk about this But there is an effort to poison and weaken the immune systems of people all over the world. If it's not outright death or murder, mass murder, genocide, it is an effort to incrementally weaken over time enormous segments of the population. You have things like, we know governments are capable of doing this. They've done it in the past. They've murdered enormous percentages of their own population. I thought it was interesting that Alex Jones the other day and many others have talked about how countries are pulling out of the globalist agenda, Russia being the perfect example. Putin, who is a nationalist, has decided to go his own way, and he is tapping into a nationalistic fervor and a patriotism that's present among the the Russian people. You know, remembering back to the glory days of the Soviet Union. Well, I don't know how glorious they were for most Russian people, but nevertheless, just like the French, the French look back nostalgically on the days of Napoleon with the magnificent empire that he created that was so destructive for the French people in so many ways. I guess Napoleon did some good things, but you know, it's an ill wind that does no one good. But normally people like to live in peace, and they don't care about glory so much. They just want to have an adequate, comfortable income so they can raise their families, so they can enjoy those simple pleasures of being an ordinary human being. And this is really what life is about. To enjoy being alive while we are spending those few short years that we have to spend on planet Earth. And without that, what do you have? One of the great lures, the seduction of the glory, is to give you a purpose. When you have no purpose, you might attach yourself to something like this. So you have the ideologues who attach themselves to a glorious cause, and they're willing to sacrifice their lives for that. And you also have people who are just getting on board because maybe it's a paycheck. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in the Middle East, because this is what the people who are actually the so-called terrorists or working for ISIS, they're actually doing. They're getting a monthly check, and they are trying to feed their families and feed themselves and keep their lives together a little bit, and so they help out. There are not many jobs that are available for most people. Among young men in the Middle East, it's a situation similar to what you're seeing in many, many other areas of the world, in which the factories are no longer in existence, or if they are, they're going more and more robotic. And what are people going to do with their lives? And so some people kind of go a little bit crazy because they have nothing to do and they don't have a purpose for being alive, and so they latch onto this, which seems good, seems like, wow, maybe we should have God or the Koran or our religion run the show, run the government. That could be a good thing. Look at all these wonderful laws. We'll have laws. We could, some of them are just on power trips. They want to kill people. They want to just run roughshod over people and have power and just be able to do what they want, get what they want, take what they want, fulfill their greedy lusts. There's some of that. There are the sociopaths out there, essentially incompetents who can't do anything on their own except manipulate people and get other people to work for them or believe in them or worship them, and that really pumps up their ego, and that's about all they've got going on in their lives. And essentially they have no real understanding of man's relationship to the universe, of how we're part of the universe, and we're all in this together, and we're all human beings, and it could be beautiful, and it is beautiful already. Just the fact that we're alive is quite amazing and miraculous. But no, that's not enough for people. They don't understand that every breath that they take is a amazing event. Just that it's happening. Because how many breaths will we take in our lifetime? Compared to the history of the planet or the universe, not very many. We're only here for the snap of God's fingers, if that. And then we're gone. And we should appreciate that. We should be grateful for that. Just for that. So all this other fol-de-rol and the turmoil that results from this feeling of unfulfillment, this feeling of what am I doing on planet Earth? It's from essentially a misunderstanding. It is an inability to appreciate a lack of gratitude and ignorance. That's what it is. And so much of what we see as dark and painful in evil is really just ignorance. I thought in that trailer it was interesting. You had some little snippets of what were obviously interviews with pilots or people who were involved, enlisted people or maybe lower level officers, probably in the Air Force, who were involved in the drone program. And you saw how being involved in a drone program destroyed their lives. They never really recovered. And this is something that was an unexpected outcome. And what we have here, we have an attempt to dehumanize, and one of the interviewees actually mentioned that I lost part of my humanity by being in the drone program. What we have here in the United States and around the world is an attempt by big government to turn human beings into robots. You know, just how like they're trying to turn robots into human beings, they're also trying to turn human beings into drones or soulless robots. Same thing. So it's the old switcheroo. This is how they mix things up in their ignorance and insanity. And we see the young people obsessed with video games. So all you do all day long when you're a kid is sit around and kill people vicariously on a video screen. And how, you could say, how is that different than killing people in reality, watching a screen, and it's just like a video game? Well, that's what they thought. That's what the people who dreamed up this diabolical drone program thought. They thought, oh, we'll just get kids who grew up on video games, and we'll be able to do whatever we want using these drones. And there won't be any repercussions or blowback. They'll just go to work and kill people and then go home and they'll be fine. Except they're not fine. Because even though it's only on a video screen, you're still being involved in murder. Okay? And it has the same effect on you as if you saw it yourself or pulled the trigger yourself. It destroys your soul. It erodes your humanity. It turns you into a victim yourself. And we've seen this over and over again. People are getting PTSD from watching these video screens and being involved in killing people Just that alone. And this is one of the reasons why this is such a great crime. The controllers, the people who own this planet, thought they could create a technology that would turn the act of murder into a mechanical and unemotional and a machine-like act that would have no emotional or soul-killing repercussions. And they failed. They completely failed. And this is why the American people, if they want to continue as human beings, we must learn and understand that this is wrong and it has to stop. And you know, you might say, well, what about all these terrorists? We got to kill these terrorists. You know, what terrorists? You know, where did these people come from? Were they guys who genuinely believe that the Koran and the religious teachings will make their lives better? Are they just trying to get a paycheck? Are they fools? Are they sociopaths? Maybe. Are they a threat to the United States? Probably not. Are they a threat to their neighbors? They might be. We ourselves in the United States live under a level of threat naturally anyway. There's no person in the world who doesn't live under a certain level of threat. I mean, anybody could be a nutcase with a knife or a gun or a sword or a bomb or a rock or poison or whatever. And oftentimes that's the way it is. I mean, it's your neighbor, it's your boyfriend, it's anybody, you know, somebody down the street. And so we cannot use technology to make the world a better place. It's not going to happen. I mean, whenever you make a gain in one area, which appears to be a gain, it turns out to be wrong, usually, and doesn't really help. It's certainly not going to make you happy. It may make your life more comfortable and give you less to do and do more things for you, but is it really going to help you? Is not having to do very much actually a help? I mean, when people are bored, they go kind of crazy, actually. When they don't have enough to do, they really do go kind of nutty. People need to be busy. They need to be engaged in useful work. And this is what we're going to see more and more in the future as technology and robotics take over jobs. So you will see a higher level of insanity as time goes on. People have to be aware of this. This can be turned around very easily. It's just the understanding that we need useful work. Human beings need it for their mental, their physical, and their emotional health. We cannot deny people that. They can deny themselves that, and they only will if they don't understand that they need to get out there and do work. This is one reason why people who retire, they just don't live very long, oftentimes. They just sort of fall apart. They've always wanted to just kick back and not do anything, but when they do, they don't last. They just, you know, they lose all their purpose to be alive. If they don't have a reason to be alive, then they end up not being alive. So, you know, life is going to continue on the planet one way or the other. But if we're constantly trying to improve everything, when just being alive is really the essential aspect of what is required to enjoy life, That's really all that we need to focus on. I mean, you need to have the basics. You need to have food, shelter, clothing, transportation, maybe a certain level of entertainment, and work, useful work. Once you have those things, and I think it also helps to have an understanding, have an awareness, a self-awareness of your relationship to the universe. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What am I doing here? We need to understand these things. And this is one of the most important reasons why we are on the planet in the first place. Because we can have a relationship with this universe that's very productive and joyful and fun and meaningful. We don't need to go around trying to change our circumstances. We can appreciate what we have. In many, many societies, they don't change much. Tribal societies. Look at the society of the American Indians. It didn't change much in 10, 11, 12,000 years or more till the white men came on the scene and really upset the apple cart. But the American Indians were pretty much content with their lives. They were nomadic. They had their myths. They had their simple life in which they lived in harmony with the earth. And yeah, they had their little petty squabbles with their neighbors and everything, but it wasn't very serious. The wars weren't really serious. Same thing in Africa. The tribal societies in Africa, it was more of a show. War was more of a contest between the two sides. You weren't really out to kill the guy in Africa, but you had your spear, and maybe if you could wound him or something, throw the spear at him and stick him in the arm or shoulder with a spear or something. And there was, yeah, some death involved, but it wasn't as serious. It took somebody like Shaka Khan, who was, I think, maybe kind of a sociopath or a psychopath, very ambitious. He created a shorter spear that you didn't throw, that you just held onto. And you could kill multiple people, and he taught them, he created a whole different way of fighting where you got in really close with your opponent and you just got under his guard and just stuck your spear right up into his heart, through under his rib cage, and that's the end of him. Then you go on to the next one. So he was able to create and quite a powerful empire that got a control of a large territory, and it still exists today. It's called Zululand. This is the Zulu tribe I'm talking about. And they were only overthrown by the Brits, who had an even bigger empire and even more powerful weapons, and were very much more serious about killing people in warfare for this purpose that probably most of the British soldiers who were involved in these campaigns to extend the British Empire, they didn't even know what this was all about, really. They didn't understand that you had some madmen at the top who were not content with what they had in Britain and were megalomaniacs, essentially, and wanted to just control and overthrow over and over. Just the same scenario that's repeated over and over and over throughout human history, where you have the people who are the megalomaniacs running the show and getting everybody else on board, or most everybody, through control of the media. That's one of their best tools. And that's what we have now. We have control of the media by a very small group of people who are trying to knock out the competition. People are finally waking up that the mainstream media is controlled by just a very small number of people who do not have American people's best interests at heart, that they would like to destroy our rights and our livelihoods and our wealth, take away our wealth and our health, and basically everything that we have, they want for themselves or to just destroy it. If they can't get it themselves, they want it destroyed. And they just want to clear out America, except for some cities, some nodes that they can use. They want to ultimately decimate the population, and that's their goal. It'll fail like it always failed in the past, but that doesn't mean they're not going to continue to try. And that's also why people who are in the know will oppose them, just as they've always done for thousands of years. So that's all there is for today. Enjoy your weekend and sleep well.